Brandon Williamson is back. Rhett Lowder is here. And Jonathan India, he's a defensive wizard. We're going to be talking about all of that and more on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr, his name is Steve Hoffenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans. Can't stress enough, sometimes it feels like multiple lifetimes with how this team plays, but we love the Cincinnati Reds team, and we have been podcasting for a combined 12 years now about the Cincinnati Reds. We want to make Locked On Reds for everybody. Every single day we'll talk about the biggest thing going on in Reds country. We'll dive into some geeky numbers, try to give some good context with it, and we'll just overreact to the daily motions of the MLB Ocean and the 162. Thank you for joining us here today. Locked On Reds is, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team, your Cincinnati Reds, every single day. And on today's show, we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to pitching. We had a great debut, two great debuts, really, over the weekend. Sunday saw the return of Brandon Williamson, a little bit unexpected, but very solid nonetheless. Also unexpected, but we kind of talked about it all last week leading up to it. Rhett Lowder made his debut on Friday in the second game of that doubleheader, and we'll talk about his performance and why it was solid. It wasn't spectacular, didn't knock your socks off, but it was solid, and it showed why the future is so bright with him. And later on in the show, I want to talk about why Jonathan India is doing something, quite frankly, I don't think we really thought he would do. And it all has to do with the glove. That's coming up on today's Locked On Reds podcast that is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we will get started today, Steve, is with Brandon Williamson. Yes, the series that the Reds just played was phenomenally horrible. The Reds lose 3 out of 4, but that one win there on Sunday at least showed a couple of good things moving forward. Because I think you and I are both under the assumption that let's stop talking about playoffs in 2024. Let's start looking about playoffs. And Jim Mora there. I think we're looking toward 2025 with that. So we're looking at a daily, like, all right, who's playing well? What are they doing that's going to help for the future? And Brandon Williamson coming back for me was very impressive.
Well, this was a big surprise. I don't think that if you had talked about this last week, either of us would have been in agreement that, Brandon Williamson's going to pitch this weekend. Yeah. I think what really happened is Nick Krall and David Bell kind of looked around the room in the major league level and looked around the room down in Louisville and were like, Nick probably just had to get on the phone and be like, Brandon, listen, I know this is a big ask, but I really need you to do me a favor. Can you just get in the car and drive up here? Someone's got to pitch on Sunday. So keeping that in mind, what he was able to actually do, making his season debut for the Reds, was pretty spectacular. If you really think about it, he went 3 1/3. I know there were some people that were a little upset that they pulled him so early, but he threw 66 pitches in this game, and he really is not stretched out yet. No. I think that was probably the right spot to pull him where they pulled him. In that 3 1/3, he gave up 4 hits, allowed 2 runs, both of them earned. He did strike out 5 guys during those 3 1/3 innings, which to me is the biggest takeaway from that start, is that the ball is in fact fooling some major league hitters already, and he's not ready. Then, of course, he did give up the 1 home run, but all in all, Jeff, I'm happy with how he looked. He's going to be kind of working it out at the major league level over the next several weeks, but I'm okay with that. This is what he did when they pulled him up originally. They brought him up, and he worked on things on the fly, and that worked out pretty well. Yeah,
I would expect his next start to be somewhere around 4 innings, maybe 5 if he is pitching as efficiently as he was in the first couple of innings in this start. Because on Sunday, I mean, the 5 strikeouts, he struck out the side in the second inning. His first 2 innings were so crisp, and he was looking so good. And you're right, like, for anybody that was questioning the 3 1/3, thinking that David Bell is just over-managing to death this pitching appearance by Brandon Williamson, that wasn't the case, because his one rehab outing that he had in AAA a week prior, he only threw 2 2/3 innings. And he actually faced a decent amount of batters because he gave up a few hits and a few walks in that. But the point with that being, he had been shut down from his rehab. He had a couple of rehab appearances back in May. He had a setback, was shut down, and his first appearance since that shutdown was last week. So we're talking about a dude that just has not pitched. He really didn't have much of a spring training at all. And then you basically enter this period where the Reds are so desperate that they're like, if you can give us 3 innings, you're worth us bringing you up, and you continue your rehab up here. That's not something that they want to do. That's not something I expect them to do in the future, but it's just that is how bad it necessitated Brandon Williamson coming up. But that's what impressed me so much about it. It wasn't necessarily that he threw, what a starter should throw. It's that he looked so good in the short amount of time that he was supposed to be on the mound.
It's probably a little bit more fair. It's probably a fair statement to say what we would expect Williamson to do his next time out in the lens of pitches in a game versus innings. Because in this first start, he threw 66 pitches, 44 of them for strikes. Not bad. I would expect he comes out in the next start, and let's say they give him a 70 to 75 pitch window, right? And if that's 4 innings, 5 innings, depends on how pitch efficient he is, but 70 to 75 sounds about right. And you get a couple starts in the 75 pitch range, and then you can kind of tweak that out a little bit towards the end of the season, and maybe he gets between 80 and 90 pitches before the season wraps up. And that's okay. That's a success, because then we go into the offseason knowing what Brandon Williamson has. And listen, I think we've all done a really bad job of hyping up Brandon Williamson. And I think we've all kind of let him be the forgotten man in all of the conversations and what about and what the rotation could look like on paper. I think Brandon Williamson is going to compete for a rotation spot next season. And if one of these young guys want to be in the starting rotation, they're going to have to take it away from him.
The opportunity is certainly there, because you're talking about Graham Ashcraft maybe moving to the bullpen next year. Nick Lodolo, lots of questions around him. And this is why I'm so excited about Brandon Williamson coming back the way that he did. If he can prove in this last month or so that he deserves an extended look next year, a bona fide, not put in pole position because that's Hunter Green, but if he's close to pole position when spring training begins, he's going to find himself in the starting rotation on opening day. And I don't think that is too far-fetched to believe. I was so happy with that. I was also happy with a couple of other performances in this game. It was great to see Jake Fraley come back.
Yeah, how good was that?
First swing, just uncorks one
he really needed
to right
that.
Field. He did.
I think he really needed that.
It was only his 4th homer of the year. He needs to see that happen a little bit more the rest of this season, I think, just for his own sake, if not for our sake. And then you see Brent Suter return, and we see the old Alexis Diaz return. Like, of those 3, which would you say is the most impactful?
For me right now, really, I think it's Brett Suter coming back and giving you 3 clean innings, perfect innings, no hits, no walks. He didn't strike anybody out either, but, pitch to contact, get the guys out. Perfect. That bullpen right now, that's what it needs. They need somebody that can come and eat some innings.
We'll talk about that.
I think if I could go 1B on that, I think Fraley's home run, just from a standpoint of you have to think that he rounds those bases, comes in the dugout, celebrates with his teammates, and then gets to have a moment of just, finally. All right. We're going long again. All right. I think those 2 things for me really stand out in that game. Both, Suter's ability to impact this bullpen and give some guys some days off.
Yeah.
And Fraley, if he's found his power swing again, that's great heading into the offseason, because I really think Fraley's going to be playing for that 4th outfielder role next season.
He's definitely got a shot. And I misspoke, because it wasn't just the return of Jake Fraley. It was the return of Rake Fraley, because he hit the ball hard. But Alexis Diaz having a nice clean inning was good to see, just because, I always like to make this analogy to golf, where sometimes you just need to hit the ball into the hole. You need to see the golf ball go into the hole. I think Alexis Diaz just needed to see that he could pitch a clean inning, and he did it in extra innings where you have the ghost runner on second base. And whenever he came out for that inning, I'm just like, here we go, because you can about count on 2 guys getting on base at some point when he pitches. Nobody gets on base, clean inning. Was happy to see that as well. But look, the game for me, as much as those return to the field scenarios were good, Brandon Williamson head and shoulders above them. Looking forward to seeing what more he's got.
Well, listen, while Brandon Williamson found his way back this weekend, Our guy Rhett Lowder, the Reds 2023 first-round draft pick, he found his way to the majors as well. Coming up, we're going to break down his first big league start. We've got that for you next. You've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we've got something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then, with a YouTube TV-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any of this at any time. And with that $5 bet, Jeff and I both tell you, you should hammer the Ellie parlay. That's Ellie De La Cruz to record 2+ total bases, at least 1 steal, and at least 1 run scored. Easy money. The odds are usually 4-1 or 5-1. So get in there today with your $5 bet. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help get you ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Jeff, we haven't talked since Rhett Lowder made his debut for the Reds. We knew it was coming. We were able to talk about it before they actually activated him. In fact, we had an interview lined up with him that fell apart because the Reds promoted him. But Rhett Lowder made his appearance. And while it wasn't Paul Skeens, it was perfectly fine.
Yeah, it was a solid debut. He didn't knock anybody's socks off. He came out and he walked the first 2 guys. What did Jeff say all last week that you can expect from Rhett Lowder? He's not going to walk anybody. Guy walks the first 2 guys he sees. So, yeah.
You're undefeated.
Thanks, Rhett. Appreciate
You're
that.
undefeated in that regard.
I am, I tell you. But after that, he really settled down. And I was impressed that we saw all 4 pitches because he is a guy that as he has come up this year through the minor leagues and as he has come up through college and all this other stuff, he's always had 4 pitches of a 4-seamer, a sinker, a changeup, and a slider. And he used all 4 of them. It feels like you see these guys debut, and it was something we saw from Hunter Green for really his first 2 years, that he was just like, no. I'm only leaning on the pitches that I know I can throw. But we saw that cerebral side of Rhett Lowder. He was able to work through the struggles that he had at the very beginning, limited the damage. There were no long balls. In fact, he only gave up 2 hits. The whole thing was the Brewers were just working long at-bats against him. They were getting deep into counts, a lot of full counts that he was working around. And I think that surprised him a little bit because he's used to the minor leagues where guys are just coming up there swinging, ready to go, and he's able to miss bats. But even in this game, he still missed bats as well. So I think when you look at the entire body of work, I would say, a solid, give it a C+, looking forward to what he's got next.
Yeah, and I think we have to look at this through the correct lens. This is yet another starting pitcher for the Reds that really probably is here before they should be here.
You and I both said we didn't expect him to be up.
I get that this was a desperation move, but I also get that Rhett Lowder has a tremendous upside and a tremendous amount of talent, and like you talked about last week, a really high floor. As bad as he's going to be, is still pretty good.
Yeah.
But this was an ask that the Reds made, and I think that looking at it through that lens, Rhett rose to the occasion. Yeah. This is a guy that got 1 start at AAA. He started this season in Dayton, guys. Jeff and I talked to him in the dugout in Dayton before he made his first professional start.
Yep, back in
Not
March.
just his this was his first professional start. He did not pitch last year in the professional ball.
Right.
He came from college and chilled out. So this is a big deal for me. He looked poised. He looked comfortable. Obviously, a couple bad at-bats there at the beginning, but the walks, they didn't haunt him. And, he had to get a feel for the zone. He had to get a feel for Major League umpiring. And he's going to have bumps. There's going to be growing pains. There will be times that he probably gets shelled even.
Yep.
But I think he definitely earned another start. And let's face it, the Reds aren't really in a position to be like, oh, yeah, we're done. Go back down. They need him right now.
Right.
But I think I want to see more. I want to see how he handles his next start. And I want to see how the league starts adjusting to him as they get more and more film on him. It's going to be interesting to see how these last few starts play out.
Yeah, right now the starting rotation is Rhett Lowder, Brandon Williamson, Nick Martinez, and a couple of TBDs. Mm-hmm. We've seen TBD way too much this season, so I would love to at least be able to pencil in a couple of guys every fifth day. And I think Rhett Lowder has at least earned one more chance, and he's going to be a guy that's a part of this rotation in the future. It's no fluke that not just us, but like if you look at Fangraphs, if you look at The Athletic, if you look at anybody that covers the Reds, and they talk about, what does the roster look like in the future? Rhett Lowder is a prominent part of this rotation, along with Hunter Green, and they're thinking Nick Lodolo and Andrew Abbott and hopefully Chase Burns. But Rhett Lowder is a key part of what they're going to be doing for the next 5 years. And we saw a little bit of that. I wouldn't say that I saw everything that I want to see from him. The 6 strikeouts are nice, but you can't be walking a guy an inning. But I don't expect him to continue that. I don't think that is... I stand by my analysis that I don't think walks are going to be a big problem for him. Hopefully we continue to see that. His debut, though, was quite horribly marred. This was the worst of the 3 losses, and it was not his fault. He only gave up 1 run in his 4 innings of work. But this was the worst of the 3 losses in the 4-game set for the Reds. 14-0 at the end of it, which, quite frankly, the last 6 runs were all just like, whatever. Luke Maile gave those up, which obviously hurts our narrative that Luke Maile could be next year's closer.
Hurts it a lot. Let me ask you this, because, Rhett Lowder in this game, again, walked a few batters, but he also struck out 6. He was not performing terrible. He allowed 1 run. It was earned, 4 walks, 6 strikeouts. When you look at his performance overall, he threw 77 pitches, 47 for strikes. I feel like David Bell came and got him too soon. I think he had at least another inning in him. Mm-hmm. I think that this Reds bullpen was not in a position to be taxed when it didn't have to be. And while I agree with the quick hook for Brandon Williamson over the weekend, because he hadn't been stretched out at all, Rhett Lowder's been throwing all year. He is stretched out, and he's quite capable of throwing more than 77 pitches in an outing. I would have given him another inning. I would have tried to spread it out a little bit and take the burden off of the bullpen.
I think that's fair. You do hopefully at least minimize the need to use Yasver Zulueta, which, don't get me wrong, David Bell. If you tell David Bell he's got a 27th man on the roster, he's going to find a way to get that guy in the game. Zulueta was the 27th man for the doubleheader. But I think hindsight's easy to say. I kind of was okay with them pulling him, because I think that was twice through the order. I'd have to go back and look. I didn't look exactly as to how many batters he faced. But I don't know that going through a third time through the order with the top of that lineup of the Brewers, the way that Willy Adames played in this series, Willy Adames is getting up into, he's past Bill Hall for the number of homers that he's hit against the Reds. He is close to Ricky Weeks. He's like 1 away. And thankfully the Reds are done playing the Brewers, so we won't see any more this year. And maybe Willy Adames leaves in free agency and goes to some American League team that we never have to see him again. But when it comes to his career as a Brewer, he has absolutely killed the Reds. So I'm kind of okay with David Bell minimizing his exposure to the top third of the Brewers' order. That being said, I definitely expect him to go 5 next time, maybe even 6, just because the way that he pitches and what he did with his strikes, it wasn't as if he was getting a bunch of fly balls that just didn't leave the yard. He was getting grounders. That's what we want. We want to see him keep the ball on the ground and get those ground ball outs, and he was able to do that when he wasn't striking guys out and when he wasn't walking guys, which I don't think he's going to do a lot of moving forward.
What's better in your book? Rhett Lowder, a third time through the lineup, or Carson Spires, first time through the lineup? Because Carson Spires comes into this game, pitches 2 innings, and I think the Carson Spires experiment is over, by the way. In his 2 innings, 3 hits, 3 runs, all of them earned. He struck out 3, gave up 2 home runs.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing, because I was definitely jumping on the Carson Spires bandwagon after a couple of starts this year, but I think I'm kind of with you. And the fact that he pitched in this game when he did, like, the Reds are telling us, you can always read, and we say this during spring training, but it's true during the regular season as well, you can read what a guy is worth based on how a team uses him, or at least how they perceive his worth. And how the Reds perceive Carson Spires' worth is he's not getting another start, And he, quite frankly, might not be a go-to, like, long relief type guy that we envisioned he could become. I think you're right. I think he's probably, I mean, he'll be on this team next year, but he'll probably be AAA depth when they need him, pull him up in an emergency situation.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's going to start the season at AAA, and I think that you're right. He's not going to start another game. Sam Moll was good in this game, though, Jeff. He was the only one that was pretty good in this game. And he had a good inning. He walked a couple guys, but they didn't score.
And it was good to see that, but quite frankly, this Reds bullpen as a whole has just been completely decimated. And the injuries are a huge part of that. But listen to this, Steve, because I was looking this up. From the beginning of the season through July 31st, the Reds were 23rd in Major League Baseball in bullpen innings pitched. You remember last year we talked about that a lot, is that they kept going to the bullpen because the starting rotation was so bad. Well, now they have to keep going to the bullpen and do bullpen days because the starting rotation is so hurt. Since August 1st, the Reds have thrown the second most bullpen innings in Major League Baseball, which I would have thought they were actually first, but they've thrown 129 bullpen innings since August 1st. And also during that time span, they have been used more, and they have not been effective. They're 24th in Major League Baseball in ERA during that time frame since August 1st. And it's just, it's taken its toll. Like, I know I see a lot of folks being like, bullpen, here we go again. Special circumstances for me. I'm not going to put too much on them here, but it is showing and it is proving who we need to trust in next season, and that list is kind of growing shorter by the day.
Yeah, if we let the everydayers in on your and mine's off-air conversations, there's several members in this bullpen whenever we say their name, you and I just look at each other and go, he's cooked.
Yeah,
he's cooked.
Yeah.
Fernando Cruz, he's cooked.
We spent all day there on Friday watching both those games, and there were a number of guys that came in and were like, great, don't need to see more of him. But yeah, that's really how it's gone. But hey, for me, great to see that after some early jitters, Rhett Lowder really settled down and showed a lot of reasons to be excited about his future. But there's also a guy this weekend that had a pretty good weekend, and that is Jonathan India, because this season he has upped his game in a way that few people, including you and me, thought he could do. We'll tell you how coming up next. The season is winding down, and the best way to get to the ballpark with the best deals is with Game Time. We always use Game Time. We'll go down to the banks, find our favorite spot to post up to, maybe grab a beverage or two, and then find last-minute deals, because Game Time has the best last-minute deals on Reds tickets and on every sporting event. As football gets going, you can go to Bearcats games, Bengals games. You can even get ready for some Cyclones hockey games as well. They're all on Game Time, and they've got amazing deals too. Plus, if you're brand new to Game Time, use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll save $20 off your first purchase. So you're getting the best last-minute deals, and for your first purchase, you'll save $20 extra on top of that. Game Time is the best way to get to the ballpark, down to the arena, down to the stadium, wherever you're going, even if you're going to like concerts and all that stuff too. Check out Game Time today. Download the app and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to save $20 off your first purchase. What time is it?
Game Time.
Game Time. You ought to check out CincinnatiRedsTalk.com and bookmark it today. A lot of great written content about your Cincinnati Reds that you can check out in between Locked On Reds episodes. I'm writing over there. Greg Kuffner writing over there. James Rapine writing over there. A lot of great folks writing about the Reds. Also, you can listen to every pitch of the Reds hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds, and you can take the Reds broadcast anywhere. You know, they got the Astros coming into town later on this afternoon, 4:10 p.m. for a Labor Day start, and then they're off on Tuesday. That was weird. I remember we were talking about that at the ballpark with a friend of the podcast.
They did that for me. I'm flying home tomorrow.
Yeah, you're
so
flying home,
you don't
get the traveling, yeah. Shout out to friend of the podcast, Sid, though. He kind of told us, he works at the ballpark there, delivering beverages, doing the Lord's work, really. But he said that he had heard that initially the schedule was supposed to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the Reds were like, we want a home game on Labor Day, please and thank you. So they made Tuesday the off day. So that's why you get the weird off day in between the series there. But yeah, SiriusXM for your Reds hometown broadcast. All right, Steve, want to finish off today's podcast with this because on Sunday during the win, Jonathan India made an amazing play. And I think it was the 9th inning. No, it was the 10th inning. Because you had the ghost runner had moved up to third. There was one out, and the Brewers did the contact play, our favorite play. And the ball was hit toward India. It wasn't hit right at him. He had to range over to his left, kind of jump up a little bit, come down with it. And as he was coming down, he transitions the ball from his glove to his throwing hand. There's a strike to Tyler Stevenson. Tyler Stevenson has enough time to catch the ball, set himself up for the tag, do his taxes, and then tag the guy running home. It was a beautiful, beautiful play. And for me, it's culminated a season of Jonathan India absolutely improving his game with his glove in a way that I didn't think he could do.
No, we have never talked about Jonathan India, defensive wizard. That's never been part of the narrative. It's always been, his bat justifies keeping him in the lineup. And his bat did yesterday. 3 for 4 yesterday on the season, 250, 349, 396. Yep. So he's still doing things offensively. But defensively, this is the first time in his short major league career that he has a positive outs above average. Now, he's been negative all the way. Right now, he has outs above average of 2. Defense is hard to measure. We talk about this all the time. But if you got to use a metric, outs above average is probably the one you want to use.
It's our favorite.
Currently number 2. Only 16 to go to catch the major league leader at second base, who has 18 right now.
It's not gonna do that.
But I don't see that happening. No. But he has definitely improved his play. His defense has improved. We've been seeing it in the form of double plays. We've been seeing it in the form of him ranging and getting to balls that even as recently as last year, we would have been like, oh, that's getting through. Yep. He's been getting to those. He's worked hard on his defense, and it shows. He's improved to the point that heading into this offseason, it's going to require us to have a lot of conversations that I didn't anticipate we were going to have about what you do with Jonathan India next year, because he signed a 2-year deal last offseason. He's locked up. The Reds know exactly what they're going to pay him. He's going to be on this team, and it could be interesting now with his increased defensive ability, the options that creates for maybe some other moves on this infield for the Reds to be better defensively in 2025.
So the Reds front office did something smart, huh? How about that?
I think they stumbled into it, but yes, they did.
Stumbled into that one. But no, you're right. What he has done defensively this season, just to put it into context, we talked about this a little bit last week on a live show, but it was kind of far in case you missed it. His first 3 seasons, he has always been in the negative. Like in 2022, not his Rookie of the Year season, but the year after that, when he dealt with injuries and played through a lot of them, he was negative 10 outs above average. And now just 2 years later, he's in the positives. Not something I ever thought he'd do, but even just the eye test. I mean, he made an amazing jumping catch during Sunday's win. He had turned a couple of double plays during this series that we've seen where, honestly, just even a few months ago, we were just like, can Jonathan India turn a double play? The answer is yes. He has figured that out. And I really think that moving forward, it's going to be hard to just say, sure, move him off second base, move him somewhere else, make him learn the outfield, God forbid. I think that he has put himself into a very good argument to stay at second base, which means the rest of the infield will have to move as the roster dictates, which that'll be an interesting conversation that we have a lot more this offseason. But I've been very happy with Jonathan India as a whole, and I think that for me, and something else we'll talk about too, I'm sure, because we'll hear some kind of rumors. If trades are rumored, Jonathan India's in those rumors, I almost feel like you kind of can't trade him now.
They would be hard-pressed to trade him. It would have to be a knock-your-socks-off deal because we don't know what Matt McLain's going to look like, and we're not going to see him this year. That's a done deal. We're not going to see him this year, so we don't know what he's going to look like. We don't know what CES is going to look like. Right. We don't know where Spencer Steer is going to have to play. So where Jonathan India was in those trade rumors last year because so much excess. We've got all these players. What are we going to do with them? Well, we figured out really fast what we needed to do with all these players. They were all going to treatment centers. That's what happened to all these players. So Jonathan India needs to stay around. He is a very moderately priced insurance policy for whatever happens next.
I'm trying to think of the official healthcare provider, the Cincinnati Reds. They've been busy. It's been a busy year for them, but overall, very impressed with what Jonathan India has done this season.
Doctor's second opinion is who's being busy.
Doctor's second opinion, yeah, exactly. We'll see about that, and as we move into this Astros series, it's going to be intriguing. I know that Verlander is pitching in the first game, which you hear Verlander and you think, oh boy, it's going to be tough. He's not the Verlander of old. Maybe the Reds can score a few on him. We'll see exactly how that goes. But we are definitely going to be with you every step of the way here on Locked On Reds as we move toward the end of the season. We'll keep on watching exactly, what to look for with certain players. I know for me, coming up on tomorrow's episode, I know that you'll be traveling, so I'll be solo on it. But I'm kind of going to discuss, were we wrong to jump our expectations the way that we did this year? Because it's definitely been a point of conversation that I've had with a lot of people here recently of how the narratives that we've heard around this team really haven't changed all that much. It's just the fact that the talent looked a lot better, and I think we were readily willing to accept some things. So we're going to discuss that at length on tomorrow's episode. Before we get out of here, wanted to remind you that you can become a Locked On Reds insider. All you have to do is text the word insider to 513-597-0944. You get a 14-day free trial. We'll text about the Reds every single day, talk some baseball in between episodes. You get a direct text line to me. And hey, maybe you become that friend in your friend group that everybody's like, so the Reds. And you're like, I gotcha. Text Insider to 513-597-0944. After that 14-day free trial, just $4.99 a month.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks, as always, for making us your first listen every day. Everydayers coming up. Jeff's going to tell you whether or not we may have jumped the gun on the excitement level of what we expected from this team in 2024 and start to kind of push the reset button for 2025. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. You can find a link for the Locked On MLB podcast in today's show description, so you don't even need to search for it. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Jeff Carr, I'm Stephen Offenbaker, and we're going to keep you Locked On Reds every single day.